This peaceful, poetic image of the Earth seen from space is misleading. Powerful telluric forces are constantly perturbing the planet. Magnificent volcanoes and tumultuous oceans, clashing over millions of years, have created dazzling archipelagos. Borne by winds and currents, we're setting sail for one of these breathtakingly beautiful islands. The Harmony G cruise expedition ship heaves into view off Cape Verde. We are around 700 kilometers from the African coast. Along with the Canary Islands, the Azores, and Madeira, Cape Verde is part of the Macaronesia, a collection of islands born from volcanic activity. Day by day, we will sail into the heart of this astonishing archipelago, beaten by the waves of the Atlantic. We will penetrate deep into lush valleys bristling with lava sentinels, and finally scale the slopes of a legendary volcano, Fogo. With its kilometers of sandy beaches and its turquoise waters, in just a few years, Sal has become a new Eden for tourists. Cape Verdeans used to make a living from fishing and from the salt which gave the island its name. They are now dedicated to welcoming tourists, often from the farthest flung corners of the world. By moving away a little from the shore and gaining height, we discover a flat, rocky desert from which a few mounds emerge, the highest around 400 meters. These are old volcanoes eroded by the elements. Sal, the oldest of the archipelago's islands, arose from the ocean, triggered by multiple volcanic eruptions some 25 million years ago. This is Cape Verde, a land with two faces, flanked by the Benefactor Ocean, but tormented by a volcanic land. The best way to explore it is still to sail with the skipper of the Harmony G, the only cruise ship sailing in the archipelago. Eddie is a Cape Verdean. A guide and a naturalist, he usually hikes with groups of foreign visitors. His world is on dry land, but he doesn't hesitate to overcome his apprehension to see his home from a new angle.
We Cape Verdeans aren't sailors. This cruise will be a real discovery for me because even though I often get around the islands, it's the first time I'm doing the trip in a boat. It'll be great. I think it'll be very interesting.
53 meters long with around 20 cabins, the Harmony G sails far from the beaten track of the routes sailed by the big cruise ships. By the end of the day, the captain has weighed anchor and is heading southwards to the neighboring island, Boa Vista, some 50 nautical miles or 90 kilometers distant. A trip that takes several hours, just time to gently find your sea legs. The boat sails at night. Each morning it moors alongside a new island. That's the theme of this cruise. It's 6 a.m. The lights of Boa Vista sparkle on the horizon. The captain has often sailed through this region. Even so, this can't be classed as routine. The approach to Boa Vista is tricky and can sometimes present nasty surprises.
Salray Portodrol with Sarbonézy, 1 mile from the breakwater. Because of the geomorphology of the area, are created huge waves, and there is also heavy swell in the harbor. It is not necessary to describe it because you will see it in a few minutes.
Would it be possible to disembark today, you think?
Depends on the condition of the waves in the harbor.
Okay, okay.
You see the swell,
Okay.
the water's coming up and down.
Oh, yeah.
Here is a surfer's paradise, but it is not ship's paradise. Salary pilot, arbonici.
The dreaded swell is finally much weaker than expected. The captain sails his boat inside the port without difficulty. As the berth is occupied by a cargo ship, he decides to anchor a few cables' length from the dock. We'll be disembarking in a rubber dinghy. Eddie enjoyed his first night at sea. He has heard of a mysterious legend about the numerous shipwrecks that have occurred in Boa Vista over the centuries. He'll take advantage of the stopover to find out more. The shores of Boa Vista have been feared by sailors since the 15th century and the first voyages to America. Neither the strength of the currents nor the absence of lighthouses can explain all these shipwrecks. While waiting for Eddie to shed light on the legend, geology provides us with the first answer. Like in all the Cape Verde islands, Boa Vista is volcanic in origin. When the island was born, around 25 million years ago, molten magma from the depths of the planet solidified in contact with the ocean. They are the shallows that today surround Boa Vista. Each rock of the landscape tells the story of an underwater eruption. A fantastic field of study for geologist Sonia Silva.
Here we see the pillow lava. In other words, lavas that contain that characteristic shape it takes when magma comes into contact with seawater. The lava's consolidation is very slow, which explains these structures that look like flowers.
These underwater basalts are found all over Cape Verde, quite naturally, as all the islands have the same origin. But it's not obvious at first glance, as from one island to the next, the geography is very different.
As they weren't formed at the same time, the islands each have a specific morphology. The oldest are rather flat. Their relief provided by alternating plains and plateaus. The most recent are mountainous. Geologically, they are very young, which explains why we can still see craters.
The atmosphere in Salre, the capital, is like that of a big village. Everyone knows everyone.
I came to Boa Vista to meet Mr. Toy, a fisherman. I heard he knows the island very well, and especially stories about shipwrecks on the coast. Do you know him?
Yes, I know him very well. I'm friends with his daughter. And each time I pass through the village, I call and say hello.
Boa Vista hides other mysteries. Golden sand dunes that ripple like waves, like the Sahara Desert. A result of the island's submersion by the ocean? Sand carried here from Africa by the trade winds? Though just 5 kilometers long, the little Deserto di Viana remains an enigma for geologists. For the majority of the inhabitants, the ocean provides their livelihood. But nothing is easy. The vagaries of the sea and tough competition from sharks means the catch often falls short of miraculous.
Aqui é a casa dele.
A casa azul?
Sim, casa azul.
Ah, ok. Senhor Toy! Olhem, onde está? Mais ou menos. Tudo direito.
The real danger here isn't the sharks, but the shallows that surround the island and touch the surface of this ocean with its tropical colors. Borne by the wind, stories of shipwrecks litter the coast. Dozens of wrecks surround the island. On Atalanta Beach, the carcass of the Spanish cargo ship Cabo Santa Maria is slowly breaking up over time.
It happened on September 1st, 1968. I remember it like it was yesterday. The weather was pretty good. What exactly happened? I've no idea. That freighter was carrying everything. Wood, cork, huge quantities of fruit. At the time it sank, there was a great famine on the island. You might say that the freighter came at the right time. We needed it.
Legend has it that lamps were lit on the coast to dupe skippers' vigilance. Truth or lie? One thing is sure, wrecked ships were a godsend to starving islanders.
Since I was a boy, I've heard that Boa Vista is a cemetery for boats. Always the northern coast. Shipwrecks always happen on that side of the island. Sometimes we'd go, hoping to find boats. It's incredible, but every time there was one, we never went home empty-handed. They say people would hang a lamp on a donkey's ass to bring boats to the shore and cause shipwrecks. But I don't believe that.
The little archipelago has an ambiguous relationship with the surrounding ocean. The locals fear it, but couldn't live without it.
Though they live surrounded by the sea, and all their history connects them to the sea, Cape Verdeans still see it with a certain mistrust. We see the sea as dangerous, but we're also aware of the benefits it brings. Tourism, for example. Despite the fear it inspires, the sea is the wealth of the Cape Verdean people.
Harmony G steams through the night to the island of Santiago. From the prow of the ship, Santiago reveals its volcanic relief. Like all the Cape Verde Islands, Santiago owes its birth to the presence of a hot spot in the depths of the planet. The basaltic magma generated by the hot spot penetrates the Earth's crust and gives birth to a volcanic island. These hot spots are fixed, unlike the tectonic plates, which move at a speed of several centimeters per year. That's how, over millions of years, this hot spot has given birth to all the islands in the archipelago. The arrival in Praia, the country's capital, is child's play. The harbor is big, modern, and the captain knows the maneuver. Though he loves sailing in the Cape Verde Islands, he sometimes regrets having so little time to explore them.
They had to stay on the ship for safety reasons. We have some jobs. If it will be free times, I can go for a beer or for a coffee, but usually not time.
The interior landscapes are marked by very ancient volcanic activity, but here the inhabitants tend to live facing the sea. We catch up with Eddie at the fishing port. Here, Cape Verdeans and Senegalese share the trade in fish.
The fish that arrives in this port supplies the whole island. It goes from here to all the markets and supermarkets. There are also people who buy the fish here, load it in their car, and drive all over the island selling door to door.
When the Portuguese came to Cape Verde in the 15th century, the islands were deserted. During colonization and the arrival of boats from Europe and Africa, a mixed race of people was born. The Cape Verdeans, or Cabo Verdeans, are proud of their mixed origins, which can be read on faces as well as in the colors of the cachupa, the national dish.
I make it with beans, sausages, corn. What else? To round it off, you can add eggs and chorizo. It's delicious. Cape Verde cuisine is a mix of Europe and Africa.
Cape Verdeans are a mixed race people, but I think we're closer to Europe.
This little fisherman's village is Ribeira Grande, the black sandy beach where the colored boats bask in a reminder of the island's volcanic origins. Here, the Portuguese and African slaves gave birth to the Cape Verdean people.
We're in the oldest street in Cape Verde. Here we find the first houses dating from the colonial era. The history of the country begins in 1460 with the arrival of the Portuguese. They settled here because water was abundant, sufficient to cultivate the land. That's the reason they stayed. This is where it all started.
Ideally located in the heat of the Atlantic, Ribeira Grande offered shelter and supplies to boats used in slave trading between Africa, America, and Europe. The pillory, an instrument of punishment that sits in the heart of the town, is a reminder of that time. Santiago, they say, is the most African of the Cape Verde Islands, a legacy that chimes with the rhythm of the batuque. These songs and percussion played just by women accompany our departure for the neighboring island of Fogo. By the early morning, the boat is within sight of the island of Fogo. The weather is mild. The captain gazes nostalgically at this landscape that reminds him of the islands of his childhood.
Look south, Felipe, how beautiful it is. I remember Aegean Sea is full of a rocky island.
Same goes for Eddie. Fogo is not just any old island.
It's very emotional coming back to Fogo Island. I love all the islands, but this one in particular. It's where I grew up. It's always a pleasure to come back. I dip back into my childhood, which feels good.
Fogo is the island of fire. The whole island is an active volcano. Despite the risks, the men who have settled here humbly accept the rages of the earth. On the volcano's slopes, the capital São Felipe retains its charm of the past. The bright colors of the sobrados, or two-story colonial houses, liven up the streets paved with black lava. Their owners don't seem to fear the volcano, whose shadow hangs over the city. 1951, 1995, and 2014, the sobrados resisted Fogo's many outpourings of wrath. They have even been enriched over time by influences from all over the world.
The architectural style that we find here isn't a copy. It has its own personality. In fact, the Cape Verdeans have embraced several influences: European, African, as well as South and North American.
80 doesn't linger in the capital. He goes up to Chá das Caldeiras to find a friend who lives with the volcano on a daily basis. On the way, the petrified lava flows are a reminder that this volcano is well and truly active. The island of Fogo is a huge rounded volcano whose cone has collapsed, creating a caldera 9 kilometers across. A perfectly conical stratovolcano, Pico de Fogo, then formed from the edge of the plateau. Its highest point is 2,830 meters above sea level. The locals who live at its feet in the caldera call it the Sage, or the Great Man.
It's a very special place. This island is the guardian of Cape Verde's telluric forces. The land was formed by volcanic activity. There'd be no Cape Verde if it weren't for volcanoes. It's great to live here because the life force of the volcano runs through our veins. I love it.
But the Great Man isn't always well behaved. On November 23, 2014, Pico exploded. The Strombolian eruption lasted 77 days. Columns of ash were projected to 4 kilometers altitude. The sulfur dioxide emitted formed a cloud some 300,000 square kilometers. Successive lava flows seeped from a crack at the base of the volcano and poured down on the slopes at a speed of 50 kilometers per hour. The villagers waited until the last minute to evacuate, in the hope that the lava wouldn't reach their homes. But the volcano had decided otherwise, and 3/4 of the 2 villages in the caldera were destroyed, leaving 1,000 people homeless.
We've just arrived in Chá das Caldeiras. Right now the people are rebuilding. Alcindo, who we'll meet, lost everything. But the people here are extremely courageous, and Alcindo, like all the others, set to work again. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
What are you up to today?
We're trying to break the lava and build a wall. We'll make a passage through here.
You're gradually trying to reorganize the village.
Of course. We can't sit idly by. Life goes on. When you see the liquid lava flowing like water, it's hard to believe that it could become as hard as this.
Okay, get back to work, young man.
We're now on the roof of my old house. The front door and the kitchen was here. And this was the fireplace. This was the water tank. The lava came, but couldn't get into the tank because it was protected by a steel door. After the eruption, we had to break the lava to access the tank. On this side, it was 3.5 meters deep. The lava got everywhere. There were bedrooms here. They disappeared after the eruption.
But although he lost everything, Santo wouldn't think of starting again elsewhere. He was born here, and his life is here, in the shadow of the volcano.
Of course, it's very hard to feel the danger so close, and to see the work of 2 generations disappear at a stroke. It's not easy to get by in Cape Verde. But even when the volcano was spewing lava, sending out bombs, ashes, gases, even at that moment, we didn't think of it as an enemy. During the eruption, the people in the village said, "The sage has awoken." Like the volcano was a grandfather who'd wake up and pulled the little children's ears, saying, "Calm down, stop, you're being too noisy." That's how we see the volcano.
The volcano is like a benevolent grandfather. Within living memory, it has claimed no victims in 28 eruptions. Men recover sulfur from its entrails to make medicines. Santo, like all the children, would harvest it for fun. He was 6 when he climbed the volcano for the first time. Back then, the crater smoked. It was impressive.
To convince me to go, my father explained to me that the smoke was made by a baker baking his bread. The kids in the village used to call the baker Nogsoti. The day I finally found out that Nogsoti didn't exist, I was massively disappointed.
Today is a time of reconstruction. A new completely paved access road bypasses the solidified lava flow. Some residents have had to leave to earn the money they needed, but all will eventually come back to build their Fogos, these traditional houses built of lava stone.
To live under a volcano is to live in duality. It's to live under a mountain that could erupt at any time. But people settle at the feet of volcanoes because the land is fertile. After each eruption, the ashes emitted by the volcano gradually change and become a kind of fertilizer that benefits the plants.
Contrary to appearances, the caldera is Fogo's orchard, with apple trees, fig trees, lemon trees, and vines. And the yields here are better than anywhere on the island. Each stalk can yield up to 60 kilos of grapes that are turned into manacon, the local wine. This owes much to the fertility of the volcanic soils and the microclimate that favors humidity, not to mention the work put in by the men.
If we don't remove the weeds, the moisture won't penetrate the soil. This moisture is produced by the condensation of overnight dew. Just remove the weeds, and in the morning, the soil is wet.
It's strange. When I leave here and go to São Felipe, I always want to return very quickly. I miss the volcano when I'm far away. I miss the shadow of the volcano. I hurry back to find the protection of the shadow of the volcano.
In the aftermath of the eruption, the government asked the inhabitants of the caldera not to return to live so close to the volcano. El Cindo and his friends replied with a song. Just out of Fogo harbor, the boat is hit by a heavy swell and a strong wind. The captain is ready. The forecast was for force 5 to force 6 winds.
The waves here, especially in this point, are very big. We are here, Fogo, and we are going to São Vicente, Mindelo. It's a distance of 130 miles about. Wind is northeast, so will be from our starboard side. That's why I am coming close to the coast. Then I will change course in order to minimize the effect of the big waves. It is ocean, cannot be calm all the time.
Tie this one close.
No more coast hopping protected by the islands. This time we're tackling the wide open sea. For long hours, no land breaks the skyline. Yet dozens of gigantic underwater volcanoes are standing on the bottom of the ocean. The top of one of them, the Nola, is only a few dozen meters below the surface. Amazing Cape Verde. As the hours go by, the ocean and the wind turn nastier. The crew members step up the vigilance. The weather forecast has underestimated the strength of the elements. 15 hours passed before we sighted the coast of São Vicente.
Copy, thank you. North-northwest, 20 to 25 knots. Thank you. You're welcome.
The night we had bad weather. We had winds exceeding the 40 knots. That means 8 to 9 Beauforts, despite the weather bulletins. In the harbor now, as the pilot informed me, the wind speed is 25 knots. You can see even in front of the port entrance how it is the weather.
Mindelo occupied the site of an ancient volcano. After a long eruptive period which emptied the magma chamber, the weakened volcano collapsed upon itself, creating a gigantic circular depression, the caldera. Invaded by the ocean, the Mindelo caldera has become one of the most beautiful bays in the world. Installed in this shelter naturally protected from the wind and the waves, the port of Mindelo developed until it became in the 19th century an essential stopover for the shipping lines connecting Europe with Brazil. At that time, all the world's sailors stopped there. The captain is on the bridge to direct the maneuver that is being complicated by the wind.
You have to coordinate. First officer forward, the other back, and it is windy. What wind? From the shore, pushing you away.
Sailboats and fishing boats sway on the turquoise waters of Mindelo Bay. It's hard to imagine that a gigantic volcano stood here several million years ago, and that it suddenly disappeared into the depths of the Atlantic. But for that cataclysm, Mindelo would never have been this port open to the world, this meeting place of European, African, and South American cultures. Mindelo is a land of poets, writers, painters, and musicians. The arts are to be found in every last detail of everyday life. And then there's the Morna, a nostalgic chant that expresses the existential angst that Cesaria Evora has carried to all four corners of the globe. Is this feeling of melancholy the same on all the islands? On Fogo, the song sung by Alcindo and his friends was inspired by the volcano. What about Claudia, this young artist from Mindelo?
There's a song I composed one night with a full moon. I like it. I was on the terrace and saw the moon illuminating the waves. The reflection lit Mount Cara. The music went...
Claudia's dream would be, of course, to follow in Cesaria Evora's footsteps.
I've been trying for 4 years to reproduce the sounds of the Morna. Now that I feel more comfortable, I will use the sounds of the Morna and integrate this rhythm into my compositions. Morna is our soul.
Two-hour sailing is enough for the Harmony G to cross the 15 miles of sea that separates São Vicente from Santo Antao. Santo Antao can only be reached by boat. 2 ferries in the morning and 2 in the evening shuttle tourists, hikers, and traveling Cape Verdeans.
As you can see, you get to this island by ferry. Here we see the people embarking for Mindelo. Santo Antao is a magical island, contrasted and especially an island where, through their work, the people have adapted and created favorable living conditions, in particular thanks to agriculture.
Like all the islands in the archipelago, Santo Antao emerged from the ocean following intense volcanic activity. A contemporary of Fogo, it doesn't have an active volcano, but does have many peaks, some almost 2,000 meters high. Santo Antao is a land of contrasts. To the south, the landscape is barren. Rain is rare. The volcanic rock doesn't retain the water that seeps through and flows directly into the sea. The central mountain range, where we find Eddie, serves up a totally different landscape.
We're at the top of the island. People were smart enough to plant trees here, pines, acacias, mimosas, and other plants. This vegetation captures moisture, and from here, water flows in the valleys in the northeast of the island. This explains why there are more inhabitants in the northern part of the island.
Trees find the water they need from humidity in the air. But for the inhabitants of Pico de Cruz, a village surrounded by pines, perched on a mountain ridge, it's more complicated. Here, there's no running water. A tanker truck comes to fill a public tank 3 times a week. The fountain in the center of the village is the place where people meet to exchange news. Women and children are responsible for the chores. Water is a problem for all the tasks of daily life.
We're entitled to 4 cans of water a day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. But since I have a bed and breakfast, I have water tankers deliver water for the showers. If you have a tank on the roof, you can buy a truck full. Then you'll have water for a month or 2. It's handier and more economical than buying cans from the fountain. Life isn't easy here. First of all, there's little water and very little work. I live from my cooking. People ask me to prepare food for lunch, dinner, or even coffee. That's my job.
Eddie appreciates the culinary specialities of Manuela, who only uses vegetables from the village. Millions of years ago, the eruptions of the Santo Antao volcano produced huge clouds of ashes. Rich in minerals, the particles that fell from the skies and covered the land acted like fertilizer. The incandescent torrents of lava pouring down the slopes of the volcano were just as rich in iron, sulfur, magnesium, phosphorus, and all kinds of other minerals. Plants can absorb the ashes minerals when they cool, but you have to wait several thousand years for the lava to be reduced to sufficiently fine particles to enrich the land. Today, the volcanic soil of Santo Antao is very fertile, but it still has to be tilled. In the valleys on the northern side of the island, agriculture is possible, but it's a titanic task. Men have tamed this landscape created by the volcanoes by carving terraces on the slopes and building hundreds of kilometers of stone walls. To prevent the rainwater from being absorbed by the soil, the men also devised a whole network of small cement channels, levadas, which run along the mountain. The water is thus conveyed to reservoirs before irrigating the plots. The marine is the man in charge of maintaining the reservoir and the canals.
The water comes down the mountain and is stored in this basin. Then it's sent to the fields in the irrigation channels. When the basin is empty, it must be refilled again, and the cycle goes on.
In Cape Verde, water is rare and therefore precious. The marine holds a key post. He is the water master.
Without the marine, it would be a disaster. People would use the water any old how. The presence of the marine imposes respect. There's a better distribution of water.
When a farmer needs to irrigate his plot, he calls the marine, who opens the lavadas, blocked by banana leaf plugs. This service is paid for, as is the water.
For irrigation, we are always in touch with the marine. He knows the flow rate. If he didn't give us the right information, irrigating our plots would take hours. We pay for the water, of course. The owner of the land pays me and also pays the marine. Water is paid for by the hour. The marine is paid every month.
In Santo Antao, you can walk for days without coming across a road. Eddie knows every last track that meanders around the foot of the mountains. His steps lead us to a sublime landscape, the Valley of Paul. Surrounded by basaltic buttresses and petrified lava needles, this secret valley carpeted with flowering sugarcane fields is a miracle of nature. According to geologists, it was the Quaternary rains, by scratching away at the soft rock, that traced the Ribeira valleys, so characteristic of Santo Antao. Cristiano is a sugarcane planter. He has always lived in this valley, and he is happy to share his landscape with passing visitors.
Lugar tá fechado, hein?
Tá fechado, mas a gente vai andar devagar. Quem quer meter cana.
Só para passar na frente.
Arriving on the island at the same time as the first slaves, sugarcane growing is done manually. Mechanization is not possible on this terrain with its steep slopes.
Here it's very steep, and the land is hard to work because of the elevation. It is hard to climb up to the plantations. And when the rains come, many of the terraces collapse, so you have to rebuild them every year.
The beauty of this valley did not stop Cristiano's children from leaving the country. All Cape Verde islands are concerned by emigration. There are, in fact, more Cape Verdeans outside its borders than there are inhabitants on its 10 islands. They refer to this diaspora as the 11th island. Away from the tourist trails, Cape Verde has long been an anonymous dot on the map of the world. The interest aroused today by its shores, its deep valleys, and its powerful volcano are persuading some Cape Verdeans to stay, or even better, to return home. That's the case with Eddie, whose family live abroad, and his friend Benvindo, just back from the Netherlands.
I left to see what it was like. I thought I'd stay, but you know, it's hard to live and work in a country when your papers aren't in order. Time went by, and I couldn't find work, so I came back to Cape Verde.
I grew up listening to my pals telling me non-stop about the USA. But I always thought it was better to stay in Cape Verde, to work and contribute to my country's future. I always wanted to work here.
It's true that whenever Cape Verdeans go abroad, they get homesick. Each time you think of home, you want to go back. When we're far away, we miss our land enormously.
Cape Verdeans have a word for this homesickness. It's saudade, carried worldwide by the voice of Cesaria Evora. But Eddie and the captain aren't feeling nostalgic. They're sharing a good time, enjoying the last evening of the cruise.
I don't see.
Because the weather is not good.
Weather is not good, there are a lot of currents, there is a lot of
The best years.
The man of the volcano and the man of the sea were tamed. Their meeting is just like Cape Verde, a land with two faces, unexpected and abundant. Here, the forces of the ocean and the earth have come together to shape extraordinary landscapes, carved by men so they can live there, despite water being rare and the volcano capricious. Far from the world's gaze, Cape Verde is the archipelago where anything can happen.